Hello, and welcome to the Terrace Scottish Football Podcast. My name is Craig Telfer, and right now I am joined by my close associate, Shaughan McGuigan.
Hello there.
And you know what happens when the Mary Bale and Lola the cat of the Terrace get together? That's right, one of us is going to get dumped into a wheelie bin for 15 hours. The other one is going to get a £250 fine and eternal vilification, and who knows, we might get the chance to talk about some lower league Scottish football at some point.
That was really bad, wasn't it? Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not a huge cat fan, but that felt very undeserved.
It was just the way the CCT, she walks past the cat, then just turns around, grabs it by the collar and dumps it in the wheelie bin and walks away. It's just badness. It is just badness.
Do you suspect that they have a bad history? Do you think that she's been annoyed by that pussycat for perhaps months or maybe even years?
Would it surprise you if I told you that I'd actually read up on Mary Bale and the lore surrounding her? Apparently, her father was dying during this period. Oh. He had been attacked by a cat, and he was dying. The father was dying. Nothing to do with anything feelings or cat related. I think she just, fair to say, she didn't have her thinking cap on that afternoon when she was out of the house.
Is there I don't suppose there was like where are they now type of article saying what she's done since the cat binning episode?
I think she's kept herself to herself. I think she'll be about 60 now. I don't know. I mean, I imagine if it's 50, that was 2010. I'm going to imagine Lola the cat's past her best. I think she's probably passed over just now.
As if every time you walk past that woman's house and like her wheelie bin's kind of moving, she's still at it.
Oh, she's got to have like a glass wheelie bin so she can always just make sure that there's nothing put in it. It's a special one given to her by the council. Anyway, listen, enough about wheelie bins, enough about Lola the cat, enough about Mary Bale. Shaughan and I are back in business to discuss all the big talking points from the fag end of Scottish football. We'll be looking at the big stories in the Championship, we'll be looking at the battle at the top of League One, and we'll be looking at the big game in League Two. Lots for us to get through. Before we get started, Shaughan, I understand you were in Southeast Asia on holiday.
I wasn't sure if you had a kind of corrections part of the start of this podcast. If so, I was just going to say that I just wanted to clarify that no, I wasn't on my own in Cambodia last week, because that makes me sound like a sex tourist. I was on holiday in Tenerife with my pals. So just wanted to clarify that.
Right, okay, that's just while we're on corrections and clarifications, just on that, I was going to come on to that. I wasn't going to clarify about your needs and habits. I was going to get a clarification from a message in Pine Bovril from a guy called John, Queen of the South supporter. On last week's podcast, Fraser Clark and I were talking about people who'd been moved into positions and people who'd perhaps been moved into auxiliary attackers. And he mentioned Paul Warhurst at Sheffield Wednesday in 1992. John writes, a bang average Division 1/Premier League central defender was asked to play as a striker because Mark Bright and David Hurst, the father of Scotland striker George, were injured. Warhurst scored 12 goals in 12 games, and when the strikers came back, Warhurst refused to go back in defence and was sold to Blackburn, who played him in the field, and he was shite.
Well, there you go. That's that clarified.
There you go. I mean, that's not much. That's not really a correction or a clarification. That's just an addendum. So maybe we need to have a separate section: corrections and clarifications, addendums. But nevertheless, Paul Warhurst. Brilliant. I was actually thinking how that relates to Scottish football, but then hearing George Hurst's dad, he's very tangentially related to Scottish football.
Very.
But nevertheless, if Shaughan, before we get going, I was working through in Edinburgh today. I was hosting an event at the Edinburgh International Conference Centre. A lot of fun, working with a couple of charities. Something a bit different, something very entertaining and worthwhile. When I was at the train station, I went to Marks and Spencer's to get a sandwich. And when I was coming out of Marks and Spencer's, I got talking to a woman. A woman sort of recognised me from a view from the terrace, and she was telling me how much she enjoyed it. And she actually gave me a post-it note to sign. And she said to me, "Listen, you're my favourite." And I was like, "Oh, that's very kind of you." But also like the other one, the one who looks like Mark Almond. And I was like, I was going through her head, who looks like Mark Almond? And then it dawned on me she was talking about you.
Mark Almond. I'm not something that's been pointed out before, but okay, fair enough, I'll take that.
No, I can see it. That's the thing. I can see it.
And had some good hits as well.
He did have some good hits. There's a terrible story about him having to get his stomach pumped. We won't go into the reasons why, but I'm sure it was just an urban myth. Just sticking with other bits and pieces of work, I don't know if you had the chance to watch the match between Stennismuir and Falkirk in the Scottish Cup.
Yes, I did.
Then you might have seen my stellar performance at the opening VT, the opening hype package.
Yes, I thought that was very good. And then you also had an additional thing that went online where you were interviewing Ross Meakin and Gregor Buchanan. All very good.
Thank you, mate. Thank you. I'm glad you thought it was very good, because there was one poster in Pine Bovril who logged in for the first time in 2 months to say my performance it was the most embarrassing thing he'd seen in the BBC Scotland channel since Mick Kennedy's Soldiers of Love speech. So I'm glad the person was able to get that off their chest.
Well, listen, everybody's different. Everybody has different opinions.
Yeah, I mean, the Soldiers of Love thing, that was quite bad. My thing was fine. My thing was just a laugh.
That was his second one, wasn't it? First one was good.
The first one was really good. I think the second one, you're trying to capture lightning in a bottle. It was like Caddyshack 2. Yeah, Caddyshack's good. Caddyshack 2, not so good.
But no, I thought what you produced was very good. Fair play.
No, thank you, mate. I expect if you didn't like it, you wouldn't say anything. So I'll appreciate that. Very, very sensitive about that. But anyway, Shaughan, listen, enough about our extracurricular activities, enough about the Soldiers of Love. Let's look at the Championship. And we're going to not necessarily focus on a game, but we're going to take a look at Raith Rovers and what's happening off the pitch there at the moment, because it's fair to say there's a bit of turmoil at Starks Park. The general manager, Dean McKenzie, stepped down with immediate effect. John Potter, the technical director, left last week. And I think there was an interview, an hour-long interview with Rory Kilgour, one of the directors, was posted. And I've not had the chance to watch it, unfortunately, but I did see a headline come from it saying that he was rubbishing speculation that the club are on the brink of administration. So I always thought that the Rovers were quite well managed, quite a fuss-free club, certainly in recent years. So to me, as a bit of an outsider, this feels like it was coming out of the blue a little bit. Tell us, what is the lie of the land at Starks Park?
So I must admit, like, I wasn't necessarily worried about the fact that, because actually there's about, I think in the last 2 or 3 weeks, there's 5 people left their position. So,
oh wow, as many as that?
Yeah, so Dean McKenzie, general manager, as you mentioned, John Potter, technical director, Mark McKenna, who also does stuff for the Scotland national team, he's an analyst.
Mm-hmm.
Graham Kilgour was the business development manager, that's Rory Kilgour's brother. And also Grace Fowley is leaving. She's not left yet, but she's leaving soon. She's kind of digital marketing executive, I think.
She's quite a young lassie.
Mid-20s, maybe, not 100% certain.
I can know who that is.
But I must admit, I wasn't that worried for a variety of reasons. Like, I knew that Grace was going into teaching, so I knew that wasn't anything to worry about. In terms of the Dean McKenzie situation, I'd actually said to a couple of people about a month ago that I thought McKenzie would leave. Not now. Like, certainly the timing was a surprise, but I thought he'd leave in the summer. And the only reason I thought that was everybody, like that entire kind of consortium that moved in 2.5 years ago, it's only him and Rory, I think, that are still there. The momentum is very much gone. He isn't a Raith Rovers fan. He has a number of businesses, and I was starting to wonder if it was just taking up his time rather than he was getting too much enjoyment from it. Another thing that I thought, there was a comparison between Raith Rovers, this Raith Rovers season, and see the last season he was at Kelty. I don't know if you remember when we done the preview podcast. And remember, obviously, when Kelty were moving up through the divisions, they were propelled by a number of big name signings for the level that they were at, I suppose.
Yep.
And his last season at Kelty, remember when we were discussing them, they'd signed, it was like 2 guys from the University of Stirling. Like, it very much felt like that tap had been turned off. And then, as it turned out, Dean McKenzie moved on X amount of months later. And I was starting to get that vibe this season about Raith. It felt like they'd not scrimped, but it felt like they certainly hadn't splurged out in the summer. It felt like it certainly looked like that they weren't going to do too much business in January. And so I was starting to wonder if Mackenzie was doing something similar now as he'd done at Kelty 2.5 years ago. And I don't mean that he'd lost interest, but my impression at Kelty was he left them in a position where they weren't necessarily reliant on him after he left the club. Mm-hmm. And I started to think there was slight comparisons to Kelty then and Raith Rovers now. But I must admit I was surprised at the timing. The other thing, and this totally came from the fact that you and me have met Dougie Imrie, because the other two people are essentially backroom staff. So technical director John Potter and Mark McKenna, who's the analyst. And I don't think I'm giving too much away, but when we were speaking to Dougie Imrie, he seems very much a kind of old-fashioned manager. Like he talked about the fact that football was a simple game, and he sometimes felt that some backroom positions weren't necessarily essential. So when those two positions left, I thought that was something that was entirely separate from the people that were leaving from the boardroom, but it just so happened that they were all happening at the same time, which from an optics perspective didn't look great. So I can understand why some Raith Rovers fans were worried and concerned that there was something in the kind of immediate pipeline that was quite grisly for Raith. But I wasn't too worried, but I did think that a piece of communication was necessary. So I thought it was well timed from what they put out on Monday.
Yeah, just on that, I just find it quite interesting that, and there's probably more to it than that, but a manager coming in, surely the managers shouldn't be in charge of infrastructure. You basically put all the building blocks in place. So the manager comes in. When Dougie Imrie moves on, the next person comes in, and there's all this great stuff for him to work with. The worry is that if Dougie Imrie moves on, the Raith have got a lot of work to do to try and put those building blocks back into place. Is that fair to say, or is there more to it than that?
Potentially, but then if you take what, and it was always slightly vague as to what John Potter's official title was. I think there was something on the website, but it was always a wee bit hard to decipher what he was doing. But I think when he was brought on board, remember when this board, or when that board came in 2.5 years ago, there was quite grand ideas, I suppose, about what they were going to do. They sort of do up the changing rooms and all that sort of stuff, and they repainted the front of the main stand. And they did do that. So certainly facilities at Starts Park, certainly in the main stand, and the exterior of the stadium have certainly been improved. No doubt about it. But there was stuff about they would do up the railway stand. That hasn't happened. There was stuff about they would potentially bring in a youth team. That hasn't happened. They would bring back the women's team. That hasn't happened. So I think when they brought John Potter in, it felt like his role would actually be a lot involved, because it's tough. A youth team or maybe a women's team, and he'd be involved in recruitment. But actually, the longer it's went on, it probably was unnecessary for a club of Raith Rovers size. So I wasn't surprised that he was dispensed with, to be fair. The interview that dropped on Monday, you mentioned there, Rory Kilgour gives it. It's an hour long. I didn't get the chance to watch it. Have you seen it? I have, yeah. Firstly, I thought he came across really well, and I thought that was important, which feels like quite a daft thing to say, but there's been a couple of examples this season in the Championship where clubs have done a kind of state of the nation type of communication. Remember Partick Thistle done one in the summer, might have been their chairman or whatever his position was at the time. I think he's now left, and I remember that fans reacted quite negatively to it.
I remember that.
And then there was David Smith, United, done a New Year message. That didn't go down particularly well. I almost felt like, I don't think it was his intention, but it almost came across as it felt United fans maybe weren't quite appreciative of what has happened in his time.
I remember that he was basically sort of calling out fans for having a pop. Was it a game against Partick Thistle or something like that? Where I think the away at Firhill, where the away fans were quite close to him, and they were giving stuff back. So I wasn't too happy about that. I remember that as well.
But I thought Rory Kilgour came across quite well, and I find it quite a unique thing because it was a 60-minute interview where, like, Davy Hancock, like, Raith TV are very good, but Davy Hancock is an excellent interviewer.
Yeah, he is
one
really
of the
good.
better ones.
He is really good.
And certainly in the lower leagues and maybe even in the SPFL in general. And like Rudy didn't shirk any question, but I thought certainly the questions weren't necessarily sugar-coated. I thought Rudy was quite honest in terms of he kind of admitted that they made mistakes in the past, which was fair enough. He didn't necessarily go into detail, but certainly he kind of hinted at maybe things that they could have got better at. He was quite encouraging about where the club is now, and then essentially laid out the challenges that the club faces going forward in the next kind of season, 2 seasons, 3.
Can we break that down into 2 parts then? So where is the club now? If he did he just to jump back a step, sorry, he didn't really go into what the mistakes were. He didn't really talk about them.
So what he said was he feels that they were complacent after the first season, but didn't explain what they were complacent about.
Go and remind me, the first season, was that when you finished second to Dundee United?
Yep. So finished second.
Yeah, we
posted
spoke
a profit.
about that because it felt as though the club never built on that. I'm sure, God, going back to the preview podcast, I had them actually down as title challengers, and you were saying, I think probably top 4 is the best we can hope for, and ultimately you proved to be, as usual, correct.
I was very much in the minority though, because I was wondering what they were being complacent about, like whether it was it about the fact that they thought they could replace Ian Murray quite easily? Was it that the fact that the first year was such a success that they thought running a football club was a wee bit easier than it really was? Was it that they felt that the standard of the squad was going to be good enough to more or less repeat what they did in that first year? I don't know, but he did say that he felt that they were complacent after that, after the first season.
So where are the club now then?
So that I suppose he was trying to allay the fears, because he spoke about the fact that he's aware that Raith fans are kind of have become anxious in terms of so many people had left the club. But ultimately he spoke about the fact that Dean McKenzie has, in his words, fallen out of love with football, and that he wanted to take time out, concentrate on his own businesses, and just wasn't particularly enjoying it anymore. They've already advertised for a new general manager. I think that went up. I think that's maybe been up now for almost instantly as soon as it was announced that Dean was leaving. But I kind of got that vibe. Like, as I said, he's not a Raith Rovers fan, so like what was he getting out of it? I'm not entirely sure. So that was the explanation for that. In terms of his brother leaving, I think he has a whiskey business. So he was travelling to, it was either China or India for a few weeks, and ultimately he decided he was going to concentrate on that. Grace did the kind of media executive. She's moving into teaching, and then the only thing that, or the one thing that I suppose I probably got wrong, thinking that maybe Dougie Emery decided that John Potter wasn't required. He suggested that basically the club or the board had decided that John Potter wasn't required. The other one that he said was a Dougie Emery decision was the Mark McKenna moving on, who's the analyst, which I think, based on everything we know about Dougie Emery from spending a bit of time in his company, it's maybe not that surprising that he decided that an analyst wasn't required.
Yeah, I just find it hard to believe, because Dougie Emery must be one of the very few relatively young managers. I mean, he's only 42, 43, Dougie Emery, relatively young in terms of management, who just doesn't like the idea of analytics. I know that there's in some schools I've thought that it becomes completely analytics at the expense of the eye test and all that, but I think that you get the pair of them working together, the analytics help inform what you see, and you can do pretty good stuff with analytics.
I mean, I don't disagree, but I suppose if the difference is you have an analyst and it means you have one less player in your squad, then maybe you just have one more player in your squad. I don't know.
Listen, Dougie Emery's taken Greenock Morton to 18 sixth place finishes in the championship, so I'm not going to dispute that. So I'm being facetious there. So what is the future for the club? I mean, in the immediate term, there's no game at the weekend just because of the Scottish Cup fixtures, but you're mid-table in the championship, probably too good to get suckered into the nonsense beneath you. But we'll wait and see whether or not the team's good enough to actually challenge for a top 4 finish. But what does the next couple, the end of the season, the next couple of years hold for the Rovers?
In terms of the immediate future, I must admit I'm a wee bit worried. I think this weekend against Morton, away at Morton's quite a big game, because then I think they play St Johnstone and Ross County. Now, if they lose at the weekend to Morton, like, they could be about 3 points out with above 9th place. So as much as I don't think they'll finish in the bottom 2, I wouldn't be stunned if they did. I think the squad could have done with a body or two in January. But we'll see. I still think it's better than Queen's Park. I think it's probably better than Airdrie, so I think they'll be okay. But it won't be. I don't see them finishing top 4. In terms of going forward, like basically said right now, as much as it was interesting, he said that they stretched themselves too much chasing, is what he said, chasing it in season 2, but they've reeled in their spending since, and now they're back on an even keel. So he said everything's fine right now, however they're not cash rich, but I suppose who is in Scottish football. Going forward, what I thought is going to be an issue is, I spoke about the pitch. There was a lot discussed about the pitch. So it only just passed its FIFA test last summer. They're going to be able to do some kind of patchwork job this summer.
Sorry to interrupt you, Shaughan. You say just passes, like it was just scraped by in terms of getting its pass marks right. Sorry.
So the belief was this would be the last season, and it would have to get torn up in the summer, and then it'd have to either lay down grass or a new 4G surface, 5G surface, whatever it is. I said that the guys should basically do a repair job on the current one, which might get another year or 2 out of it. I think the quandary that they're in, and I suppose any club that has aspirations to potentially getting promoted, is you can't play in the Premiership without a grass pitch. But he said a grass pitch would cost roughly £1 million. I think a new AstroTurf pitch, I think the figure that I saw was about £400,000. So by his own admission, they basically suggested that they are kicking the can down the road. They talked about the fact that they've met potential investors from down south. I believe they're involved with Brentford.
Okay.
But their issue was the ownership structure at Starks Park, which is very complicated. The pitch, and I can't remember what the third one was. Basically, there was 3 things that they were uncomfortable with, and so that investment opportunity was, according to the English consortium, on ice. Now, whether that was just them being polite about thanks but no thanks, I don't know. But definitely the big thing is about the pitch, and it's like Starks Park right now is used it's used 7 days a week. I mean, I would say that like the most successful thing about Raith Rovers right now is their community arm, and how many different groups, and whether it's kind of toddlers to people that are keeping fit or whoever, like the pitch is used almost non-stop. But obviously, if you install grass, then you've removed that. So I think they're in a very, very difficult place with that. I think there's a suggestion that they can maybe build training facilities elsewhere in Kirkcaldy, and they would get grants for that. But that felt like a wee bit away. So it was all very, very interesting stuff, to be fair.
What about the stadium ownership then? Is that, how complicated is that? Who owns Starks Park?
I mean, in a very, very simplistic way, John Sim owns Starks Park.
Okay.
But
that's good. That's good.
Well, it's good in that he is a Raith Rovers fan. Like, that helps. I suppose what you ideally want is somebody who can come in and then bring both together. But that's easier said than done, because suddenly purchasing the club becomes that bit, well, much more expensive, because you're purchasing the stadium as well. So it was, and I think it put a lot of people's minds at ease in terms of the short term. I do think in the kind of medium term there are concerns, but you could say that about virtually every single club in Scotland.
Yeah, I know. I didn't properly read into it, and I feel like I've barely done any. Rehearsals, preparation for this podcast. I was thinking like Great Morton are in a bit of bother, aren't they? I just kind of stuff I was glancing on Pine Bobber. I haven't had the opportunity to proper interrogate that. Queen's Park, of course, the saga still rumbles on. So maybe that's just it. Just constant turmoil. That's just the way it is when you support a smaller team.
The thing is, there is generally people looking to invest in Scottish football teams. What you always have to make sure you do is that you are essentially handing the keys over to somebody who is fit and proper. And that's always a difficult thing. Like the Morton situation seems to be some group who have either already have some very small teams in their portfolio. Like Morton would be the biggest team in their portfolio, and they seem to be involved in some weird kind of AI. Like there was some red flags about it, but that's without knowing too much about it. But like as I said, generally there are people looking to invest. So I would imagine somebody will come along. You just always want to make sure that they are the right person that you want to be handing the keys over to.
You've just absolutely warped my head. I cannot believe there is a consortium of football clubs with Greenock Morton as its biggest. Fucking hell! Could you imagine then? Like imagine you own clubs in say like Belgium. You've got one in Portugal. Or could you imagine the calibre of the players that would get traded between those clubs? Oh my goodness, there would be some absolute stinkers in there. Who's the big boy? Was it what was his boy Cham? Was that him? Imagine just like guys that were worse than Cham just being recycled through these clubs, laundered through these clubs. That's exciting. That's very exciting. A concern about it altogether though is that if you to go into their website, they'd mentioned Morton, but they'd spelt Morton incorrectly. They spelt it Morten. I saw the joke there saying it was an errant Dundee fan that's interested in buying the club. Bloody hell. How would you feel, just out of interest, just on that, how would you feel if somebody came with a portfolio of clubs and wanted to add the Rovers to it?
I would need to see. You probably want to check what their track record was. Like, I mean, I suppose it's slightly different, but the guys that came in Dunfermline recently, like they already had investments in at least one or two other teams. And then I kind of read up on it, and like there wasn't too much negativity from what they'd already done elsewhere. So I did think when they came in, like as much as it was, this guy's a poker player, blah, blah, blah. They're like, I don't know if that sounds necessarily great. But actually, when you read up on them, like there wasn't too much negativity from what they'd done at two or three other clubs. Now it feels like, I think at least one or two of them are getting involved in, or potentially getting involved in Sheffield Wednesday. So I suppose you go with all the evidence that you can conceivably find. And again, ultimately, it depends. If it feels right, I suppose, in terms of everything that you can read up, then I wouldn't have an issue with it.
I'd be dead against it. I'd be really unhappy. Even if they said, we've got some Brazilian teenagers, God, it sounds like some Jeffrey Epstein would write in an email there. But it's say you're taking all these like young kiddies on loan, and I just know it feels a bit grubby. But then I suppose you've got cooperation agreements, strategic partnerships. I think just if you support a club further down the food chain, you're probably going to have to get involved with these schemes to try and get your club.
Let me get this right. Let's say 2 or 3 Brazilians from Flamengo turn up. You're not going to be excited by that.
I'll be intrigued. That's what I'll say. About that when they score, I want to celebrate. Just to prove a point. Just the two teams you mentioned, Shaughan. The Rovers are playing Greenock Morton at Capello on Saturday. You're going to head over to that one?
I'm not actually. I'm not. In terms of what I think is going to happen, I have a horrible feeling that Morton are going to win this one. The fact that it's Ian Murray and Dougie Emery, but kind of crossing over with different teams.
Yes,
the fact that they're going back to, or Dougie Emery will be going back to his old stomping ground. Morton looked okay against Ross County, so I think this might be a home win.
Wonder if when Dougie Emery goes back, if there's like a carpet with the Morton crest on it at the reception, he just walks like around the crest. You remember Rio Ferdinand? That performative. I think it was at the Bernabeu and the Real Madrid crest is the thing where he's like, and well, listen, are you filming me? Are you filming? Brilliant, right? I can't walk around that. He's just a berk, isn't he, Rio Ferdinand? Yeah. Just a great big berk. I saw stuff, there was a game, was it El Clasico in Saudi Arabia where the players were walking in and he's like high-fiving them and he's like, Vinicius Jr., he's like whispering advice into them. It's incredible. Like Ferdinand is probably my lifetime, one of the greatest players of my lifetime. Just an absolutely phenomenal defender. Just a big berk.
Did you see him when he was asked about Excuse me, asked about ticket prices for the World Cup.
I think they're all right. Hey, just supply and demand, isn't it? He's a big sellout. Yeah, big sellout. Anyway, right, enough about Rio Ferdinand. Just before we move on, Shaughan, this was a game that I was hoping we'd actually get the chance to talk about. It was going to be the KDM Evolution quarter-final between St Johnstone and United, but it has been postponed for a third time. It's supposed to be played on Tuesday night. It's been pushed back until Tuesday the 17th of February. Interestingly enough, the game is going to be played at the Falkirk Stadium. Falkirk, of course, play on a plastic pitch. And who were one of the teams to vote against synthetic surfaces to be used in the top flight? That's right, St Johnstone. So there's an interesting little rub there.
I mean, I suppose it isn't a great look, but by the same token, I think in the kind of east coast of Scotland or kind of northeast has had about as much rain in the last month as you would expect in 6 months. So, but I know where you're coming from. I actually thought this was initially mooted about a week ago. Somebody suggested on Pie and Bovril that if it's cancelled 3 times, it gets moved to a neutral venue. And I thought it was a load of rubbish. And I think the majority of the replies were saying, no, I don't think that's a thing. But fair play. That person was very accurate.
No, good to see Craig Anderson still getting things right on Pie and Bovril again. That's good to see. I just wonder if it's the state of the pitches in the northeast, like Aberdeen, Dundee. I mean, they were supposed to be recording this on the Wednesday night. There was a game. In fact, was it in Aberdeen, wasn't it, against Dundee United? Mm-hmm. But that's been called off. I wonder if the Falkirk Stadium might just play like 3 games in one day. Just like have a game at like 10 in the morning, a game at 3 in the afternoon, and a game at like 8:30 at night. And just let everyone just churn through. Remember, they were going to have that big Royal Rumble at Hampden. They were going to play 2 League Cup semi-finals in the same day.
I was going to say it would be similar to, was there not countries that had like during COVID, just have like in a COVID bubble stadium and they just play all the games in the one stadium? It was similar.
Fantastic. So we were saying we should turn the Falkirk Stadium into basically the wet weather equivalent of the COVID bubble stadium. Why not? Listen, we'll talk about actual football matches. We'll head into League One and look at, we'll say the 2 games. We can look at one game and maybe just talk about another game because there's no match highlights for this exist. Inverness Caledonian Thistle thumped East Fife 3-0, while Queen of the South were held 1-1 by Cove Rangers. Caley Thistle have now opened up a 3-point advantage at the top of the table on Stennismuir in second. But it feels like this was a missed opportunity for the Doonhamers. They're in third place with 39 points and have played a game more. Shaughan, we'll start with Inverness Caledonian Thistle's win over East Fife. I think given both teams' form coming into this one, this was of the weekend, even including the Scottish Cup ties. I think this is perhaps the most obvious and predictable result in the country to call over the weekend. Alfie Stewart opened the scoring after just 3 minutes. Paul Allen and Alfie Babbage wrapped things up with a goal each in the second half. East Fife did not bother to defend any of the goals. I think Paul Allen's goal, I think that might be some of the worst defending we've seen this season. And just like that's Caley Thistle taking 10 points from the last 4 matches, well and truly back on track. And East Fife, meanwhile, free fall. That's their 7th successive league defeat. What's your thoughts on this one?
This just felt like a very, very one-sided match. I mean, it was 3-0 going on 5 or 6, maybe. I suppose that's indicative of a couple of things. The fact that Inverness appear to have got over that blip that they went on. So they lost to Montrose, lost to yourselves, and then were quite fortunate to get a draw against Cove. I think Cove missed a penalty in the last minute.
Yep.
However, since then they've won maybe 3 out of 4. Although I suppose if you're grasping for positives from a Stennismuir perspective, 2 of their wins have come against that fairly awful East Fife team in that time. But in terms of Saturday, I thought, well, we didn't really get a chance to look much at their defensive capabilities. But see, just in terms of going forward, I think in terms of Chanka Zimba, Alfie Babbage, Jordan Alonge, Liam Soul was kind of on the right, and then Alfie Stewart coming for a wee bit deeper. That just feels like, in terms of a combination and the way they were combining for some of the goals and some of the kind of chances that they were creating in general, that just feels like the kind of best kind of forward unit of anybody in League One. It just looked really, really impressive.
Can't disagree with that. I think that when you see the when you see just how fluid they make it look, and going by the highlights, and it was East Fife's highlights I watched for this one, because I do think that East Fife produce a really good highlights package. I really like the commentators for it as well. Oh, it's just on that, I found it really funny. The longer the highlights package went on, the main commentator, who's generally pretty good, he was so despondent by the end. It was like, I think that East Fife had a chance. It must have been like the 90th minute, and he could barely raise his voice to add anything to it. So fair play to him. I don't blame him, because it looked like it was a pretty ropey performance. But just going back to Inverness Caledonian, I completely agree. I think Alfie Stewart is in really good form at the moment. He's a player that can really, really make things happen. Jordan Alonge, who you've touched on there, finally scoring goals. Someone that I think it was after the game against. Oh, it was a game we touched on in the podcast. But I think that Billy Mackay was talking about him, was really happy with his contribution, and said that he'd had to be patient in the past, and now he's actually contributing to the team. Chinka Zimba definitely has something about him. He's quite raw, quite unpredictable, but when it clicks for him, he's really strong. And Liam Soul's just a really good dribbler. Another player, when it clicks for him, great to watch. And I don't really think there's another side in League One that have got the same kind of incendiary attack as them. Stennismuir have got some really good forwards. Like Ross Taylor's a really exciting player to watch. And at Queen of the South, guys like Brennan Dickinson, Liam Smith, Kai Kennedy, all very good. But for a team just that can do it as consistently as Inverness Caledonian Thistle can, I don't think there's anyone else.
And even when they've been doing well this season, they've kind of been, I think, they've been grinding out results, albeit in a number of their kind of one-goal victories. Like, they've kind of squandered a lot of opportunities. So maybe the flow of the game has been more on top, but the results have maybe just been winning by a single goal. However, in terms of this one, it was 3-0 going on more. Yeah. They absolutely hammered East Fife just a week or two ago as well. So it kind of feels like I think we mentioned at the time that it might have stumbled on a system, whether it was out of necessity or whether it was exasperation with Witherspoon dropping out. I know Chalmers did drop out, but was back in again at the weekend. I know Ross Millen wasn't playing at right back. So it's interesting that he's dropped a number of experienced players, and now people like Witherspoon and Billy Mackay are maybe coming on when they need to see a game out, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, that's the luxury that you've got. You can play all your young players, and you can absolutely come flying out the traps at teams overwhelm them. I mean, that goal was scored after the 3 minutes there. Yeah. Alfie Stewart getting the first goal. Like against Queen of the South, they opened the scoring after 9 minutes through Liam Soul, you know. So in the last couple of weeks, they have been able to come out there and fire at teams. And then when the game slows down a bit, as it naturally does when players get tired, then you bring on David Witherspoon, a very technically gifted player. Doesn't necessarily have the legs for it anymore, but not many folk will be able to take the ball off him. And same with Billy Mackay. Billy Mackay's not going to like run laterally. And I remember Duncan Ferguson played him like wide on the right. Like, are you going out your way to try and embarrass him? Are you going out your way to try and embarrass him? Because it feels like you're going out your way to try and embarrass him. But Kelleher's got a wealth of options at his disposal. What I would say though, Shaughan, in this game, I think it's important to contextualise it, because as good as Inverness Caledonian Thistle were, I thought East Fife, the defending was so poor. The second goal, Paul Allen's goal, there's a point where he has got 4 players around him. Yeah. Actually, it's quite reminiscent. You know where Argentina were playing Belgium, and there's that famous image there of Diego Maradona, all these confused, startled-looking Belgians with moustaches all sort of peering around at one another. It was like that. He had 4 players around him, and then nobody thinks to get the ball off him. It felt like, you'll have seen it probably in the past, you play someone at FIFA, they put the joypad down and somebody goes in the attack, and the computer moves them around them but won't actually tackle them. And there was a bit, I can't quite remember who it was. It might have been the ball boy Halsey that's coming at right back. I think it was Joe Halsey. Just seems to let the ball. I think he's kind of looking for like Div Wilson to come and clear it, and then he just runs, and it's a good finish. But my goodness, you've had 5 players, if you want to bring Wilson into it, that could have stopped that, and no one does. And that's why they're bottom of or certainly not bottom, but they are sinking fast. These 5, I think they're in real bother at the moment.
Yeah, that's 8 defeats in a row, and like I know they've had
all competitions. Yeah,
and I know they've had injury worries. I know they've brought players in. I'm even a wee bit worried about the players that they've brought in. It's a kind of lower league from England special that Dick Campbell started to specialise in latterly at Arbroath, and it generally didn't work.
Funny you should say that. I don't know. I'm going to imagine you haven't had the chance to listen to last week's podcast.
Because some of it, not all of it.
Right, because that's something that Fraser Clark and I said. It was very much a post-Joel Newbley kind of transfer window, where you think, Joel Newbley's amazing and he came from that level. Everyone must be amazing that they come from that level. And it's just that we spoke about this. It's like the names of the players, the level they've come from. I don't know. I mean, I've no doubt there are some great players there, like Joel Newbley being the perfect example. I think there's still people like Arbroath fans who will say he is one of, if not the greatest loan signing the club have ever had, and he was a huge factor in them having that brilliant start to the season in the 21-22 season. But Campbell did seem to lose the run of himself and just go and sign players from that market. And I'm not sure how you might have issues with strikers, Alan Troughton be getting sent off and being unavailable, and like Nathan Austin not being fit, and Mikey McKenna being out. But at the same token, every team kind of goes through injury problems. These are things that I know it's annoying. Tommy Gloucester's another one who didn't necessarily have the most successful loan spells there. But these are things that happen, and just they really haven't dealt with them. And I'm just not sure if this group of players that he signed, I think it was like 6 or 7 transfers that came in. I don't know, Shaughan. Don't know.
I think, though, what will probably save them, in fact, before I even get to that, I do think that like Dick Campbell's post-match stuff is very interesting. Like, he seems to be getting flakier and more irate. I mean, he didn't swear this week. He kept his potty mouth.
He didn't swear, but he took about 10 seconds to answer the first question.
It was a really big pause. Yep, a really big pause.
It's almost like he was just like booting to life, But you're right. I mean, I do agree with things with the defending, because that's rubbish, and so you've got your sympathies for him with that. But I don't know how you fix that. I saw some people, like, I will say some people again. I'm going by comments from Pine Bovril that were saying, because this is an easy stick to beat the Campbells with. That when they're not doing well, they're too old, they're past it. Football's moved beyond them. Football hadn't moved beyond them last season when they got East Fife promoted. Yeah. I mean, that East Fife team last season were in League Two, were a really good side. They could be really, really entertaining when they turned on. And yeah, I appreciate it's a step up in levels, but that and they've got their issues. But I don't think that's reflective of Campbell's age and his experience. No, I don't think so. I think it's just a cheap thing to bring up.
Yeah, I think so as well. I think what may save them is, every time I hear people talk about Cove Rangers, and obviously they played at the weekend as well, they talk about, they're a good team. They're probably a top 4 team with that team that they've got. I think they'll be fine. Cove Rangers have won like 1 game in 6.
Yeah.
Like it feels like, yes, they might have a talented starting 11, but they're not doing enough quickly enough to get out of that kind of quagmire of the bottom 2. So and you have Hamilton, who now have a very young starting 11. You've got Kelty, who yes, have improved, but they're quite a bit away as well. So that there's as bad as East Fife have been, like 8 defeats in all competition, there's still a gap there. So it only feels like there needs to be a slight turnaround in East Fife's fortunes, and they'll probably be fine. But I appreciate that things are looking bleak at the moment.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's an 11-point advantage over Kelty Hearts at the moment. So I'm going to, barring, 2 things, East Fife to keep on losing matches, not outside the realms of possibility, but you'd still imagine to pick up for them to turn around. Once, like, they've got a focal point up front, once Troughton's back in, once McKenna's back, once Nathan Austin's back in, and then you're expecting Kelty to pick up incredible form over the final third of the season, which I can't really see happening myself. Yeah, they've improved a wee bit, but there's still a long way for them to go in that regard. I mean, the games that are coming up next, Shaughan, we've got Inverness Caledonian Thistle away, Inverness Caledonian Thistle away at Hamilton Academical.
I think Inverness will. I think they've got a fairly good record against Hamilton this season. I'm sure they absolutely leathered them at least once, so I'll go for an Inverness win.
And then it's East Fife at home to Cove Rangers. Another big game.
Based on the fact that Cove have improved but don't seem to win games, I'll go for a draw.
Fair play. The other game had big ramifications. Well, it didn't actually have any ramifications. It just, the team got a point.
It just
Fantastic.
happened.
Yeah, it just happened. It was a 1-1 draw between Cove Rangers and Queen of the South at Balmoral Stadium. As we mentioned, Kai Kennedy gave the visitors an early lead, but Mitch Megison tied the match midway through the second half. Probably a decent point for Cove Rangers, all things considered. But maybe 2 points dropped for Queens. I say maybe 2 points dropped for Queens. We don't know. There hasn't been any highlights. And there hasn't been the lower league goals roundup on the BBC Sports Scotland website. So, great.
I was very much going on Paul Hartley's and Colin McMenamin's post-match interviews and kind of comments on Pine Bovril. They kind of sounded like the Queen of South fans where I think if you'd maybe said at the start of the season, a draw at Cove, that's a good result. But actually in this context, where they needed to win to keep the pressure on. In terms of winning the league, in terms of being in title contention, this felt like a game that they had to get 3 points, and they didn't. And I think what made it all the more disappointing is that they got the early lead and then weren't able to build on it. And then ultimately, it felt like a point was probably the fair result. I think probably the kind of saddest part of the game was the fact that, now, is it Menzie Masway that Queen of South got on loan
for Middlesbrough?
Yeah. Was it Middlesbrough or Birmingham?
Oh,
yeah,
Birmingham. Sorry. No. You keep talking. I'll check that out.
I think the reason that Peter Murphy wasn't able to do the post-match interview is that he actually drove him to hospital. So
wow.
I think he got such a bad one, albeit I don't think it's maybe quite as bad as was feared, but he has went back down south, so I think he'll be out for between 6 to 8 weeks. So presumably he won't be. That'll be the last we see of him. But that was a 20-minute Queen of South cameo where I think, from what I gather, he looked quite exciting. But it was interesting as well that Queen of South put out I don't know if you saw it, was essentially an injury update. But I mean, very, very lengthy. I think there was maybe 7 or 8 players where there were like some are either struggling or maybe in the process of coming back in the next 2 or 3 weeks, or aren't going to be back for kind of another 5 or 6 weeks. And whereas Queen of South have
fucking hell
a kind of a reasonable size squad, it's certainly not big enough to deal with like that number of injuries.
Christ, I've just gone on to the Queen of South website you're talking. First up, Shaughan, you're absolutely correct. Menzie Masway is on loan from Birmingham City, not Middlesbrough. I think that I've got that mistaken. In the past, I'm sure Queen of South have taken a number of players.
Yes,
I think they had quite a decent relationship between the two. I think some of the boys that they'd taken on loan have gone on to play well for Middlesbrough and elsewhere. Yeah, so now we've had time to assess the injuries sustained at Cove on Saturday. Peter Murphy has given the squad the following update. So Menzie Masway, right? These are all the players that are mentioned in this, right? Mm-hmm. Menzie Masway, Liam Smith, Jack Stott, Jack Hanna, Brennan Dickinson, Mikey Hewitt, Ross Stewart, Curtis Guthrie, Kai Kennedy, Benji Louison, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 players that are mentioned there.
Aye, that's too many to sustain a title challenge, I suspect.
Bloody hell! Let's just get a wee look and see who those teams have got. We mentioned that Cove Rangers are away at East Fife. Queen of the South, meanwhile, they're at home to Alloa Athletic.
Alloa it's funny because like Alloa aren't a million miles away from the top spot. I think it's only 10 points, but their form's dreadful. I think it won something like 2 games in 10 or something like that. So as much as Queen of South have a number of players injured or have question marks over them, I suspect they do have good home form, so I'll go for a Queen of South win.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the previous results between these teams. Queen of South have actually beaten them on both occasions. Mikey Hewitt scored in a 1-0 win back in October, and Curtis Guthrie and Liam Smith scored in a 2-0 win in December. But none of those players might make this match, so who knows? It might be quite easy for Andy Graham's side. I actually think that Alloa's form has gone off the boil when you said they're one of the most exciting teams to watch in the country. That was like a flick of the switch that turned them from really good to being absolute gubbins.
And not just that, but I think their fans have talked about how boring they are. So literally as soon as I said they were really exciting,
That's great. So I appreciate that, Shaughan. More of that, please. More of that. Just before we move on, let's talk about Queen of South. Made a big signing.
Yeah.
Just after the transfer window, Nicky Clark has returned to the club. He was a free agent after leaving Ross County a week or so. He played 2 seasons for Queen of South. His last season for the club was in the 12-13 season. An amazing season for the Dooneyhamers. They won the second division title and the Challenge Cup. In that campaign, he scored 41 goals in 46 appearances. Absolutely ludicrous number of goals that campaign. Comfortably the best in his career. Hasn't come anywhere close to recapturing that form. I really did feel like that was a once-in-a-lifetime season for a lot of the players within that team. And I think he returns to the club after a kind of couple of indifferent years that Leeds St Johnstone wasn't all that well thought of. Didn't really have much of an impact or any impact at all at Ross County. Came in, I think a lot of people were wondering what the thinking was behind that, and then he was let go after 6 months. How do you think it'll work out for him at Palmerston in his return?
I'm not entirely confident this is going to work out. It's very much that should be a good signing for that level, but I'm not so sure. I think if they can come up with a way where they can essentially allow him to be a kind of penalty box poacher, then
just do what he did the last time.
Yeah,
but if they should do if they can re-sign Gavin Riley from Arbroath, get the pair of them do it up and let Gavin Riley do all the heavy lifting, and get Nicky Clark just like him leaning against the post having a cigarette, and the ball comes over, stubs it out, gets back onside. Then you're right, because I think, am I right in saying that latterly he kind of fancies himself playing in a sort of more of a deeper role where he can he just dictate play, and I'm not sure that's when he's at his best. Just if you can find a way to get him inside the penalty box, and I think that at this level Queen of the South maybe can, the other teams maybe. I think he'd actually be quite a decent foil to Curtis Guthrie's injured at the moment, but I think he'd actually might end up being a decent foil for him, that sort of little and large partnership. Guthrie does all the heavy lifting, you can have Clark in alongside him.
Potentially, I find that a very odd thing that, like, the older he's got, the deeper he's wanted to play in, which surely involves doing more running rather than just being a kind of poacher. I find that unusual, but I'm not sure how it's going to work out. I have my doubts, I must admit.
Imagine that he just wanted to be a goalkeeper all this time, and that's it. He's just dropping.
Ross Stewart's injured. Ross Stewart's injured, so that's fair. He can play on his debut.
We will drop into League 2 and we'll take a look at Saturday afternoon's match between Edinburgh City and East Kilbride at Meadowbank. Yeah. We talk about Edinburgh City all the time. If you don't like it, go and start your own podcast called the No Edinburgh City Podcast. This is quite a comfortable win for Kilby. 2 first-half goals from Bobby McCluckie gave Kilby a deserved victory. Now, City are still bottom of the division on 16 points, but after Dumbarton lost to Forth Athletic at the weekend and then followed up with a 1-0 defeat at Annan Athletic on Tuesday night, there's now only 2 points between the sides, having played the same number of games. Look like it's going to be a straight shootout between the two of them to avoid finishing bottom. Meanwhile, that win has moved East Kilbride within 3 points of the Spartans at the top of the table, albeit having played a game more. Shaughan, with Stennismuir taking on Falkirk on the Sunday night, I had the Saturday afternoon free. I punched the air when I saw this fixture was taking place. I went along to it. This is the 3rd time I've actually seen these teams play each other this season. So you can feel free to ask me any questions you like about Edinburgh City 0, East Kilbride 2.
This looked like a very, not necessarily one-sided, but certainly a very comprehensive win for East Kilbride. It looked like that they scored a couple of goals after what was 39 minutes. I think they were 2-0 up, and then they essentially held Edinburgh City at arm's length, but it looked like they'd done it quite comfortably. Would that be fair enough?
I'd say so. You know what this game reminded me of? Have you ever seen Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark when Indy is confronted by the big guy waving the sword around?
Yes.
And he just shoots him.
Shoots him.
Yeah, that's what this reminded me of. I watched both managers' post-match interviews, and I think Mick Kennedy got his absolutely spot on. I agree completely with what Mick Kennedy said, where he was talking about that they changed their tactics to reflect the fact that City were going to have a lot of the ball, and Cammy Elliott dropped into a slightly deeper position. And he was talking about they wanted it to be more compact when they didn't have the ball. completely right. Allowed Chris McQueen and Jamie Walker to pass the ball amongst themselves. Fine, no bother. It worked a treat. It worked absolutely spot on. And when McIndoe was talking about how the team controlled the game and East Kilbride struggled to get the ball off him, I completely disagree. I completely disagree with it. I don't think they controlled the game. You cannot say you controlled the game when effectively the ball, the players that took the most touches were the centre backs and the two full backs who would get the ball and then pass it straight back to them, and they would turn and then pass it to the centre back who would pass it to the right back who would turn and pass it to the centre back. It was basically horseshoe football. They didn't control the game. They had a couple of decent chances. They had a penalty when João Balde fell on top of the ball and tried to like guard it with his arm, and Ollie McDowell put a header past the post in the first half. That was about it, really. That was about it. And it was almost like East Kilbride. You're seeing those things when there's a bully, he's got a wee guy, he's pushing his forehead and the wee boy's like swinging his arms but nothing's happening. That's what it was like. I thought that Edinburgh City had a lot of the ball, just didn't do anything with it, and East Kilbride were just ruthless, and they could have scored more at the end. They had chances right at the very end. So in terms of assessments, I felt as though I was watching the same game as Mick Kennedy. Felt like I was watching a very different game to what Michael McIndoe saw.
Is this the first time, and I appreciate you don't go to Edinburgh City every week, but is this the first time where you have listened to a Michael McIndoe interview and thought to yourself, I don't think this is necessarily based in reality?
No, because I think a lot of his interviews are not necessarily based in reality. But it was, but I just found it confusing. That what I would say is, I've been to see Edinburgh City a number of times over the course of the season. You know, for somebody who's not, I think I'm probably seen Edinburgh City more than most people. Somebody who's not an Edinburgh City fan, I like them. I like the people that go there. I quite like Meadowbank in a weird way. I like driving to Edinburgh. I like getting parked at Meadowbank Retail Park. Just all these wee things that I like about the ground. But even at the start of the season, when they had no fit strikers and they could only name like 2 players on the bench, one of whom was a goalkeeper, and they had to play big Jack Duncan up top and basically just go direct to him and play balls off and try to get like Innes Lawson and Malik Zaid, and that was a lot more fun. This was just, it was boring. There was parts in the game, a number of times, like Ollie McDonald didn't have a particularly good game, and I'll be honest, I'm not sure what the wisdom of him being given the number 9 jersey and playing up front is, to be honest. We yet to see what he really brings to the team. There's a bit in the second half, and it happened about 2 or 3 times where he peels off to the winger and then tries to drop the shoulder and then spin in behind him and look for a ball over the top. So Edinburgh City are playing with the ball across the back 4. McDonald's making these runs. He looks up, sees a fullback with the ball, tries to drop and spin in and make a run behind, and the ball just doesn't come. It just goes back in field again. And it was just the frustration that they were 2 goals down and they just weren't doing it. There was no real sense of urgency to get things going. And that's what I was like. I was like, just like, come on, make something happen. And like I say, earlier in the season, when it was just a bit more chaotic, it was more effective. I think there was the game that we've spoken about when the 2 teams played each other. East Kilbride were the team that wanted control, and Edinburgh City didn't want them to have control. Edinburgh City wanted them to, wanted to really just to be disruptive. But this was the opposite, except East Kilbride weren't really interested in being disruptive either. They were just like, we're winning 2-0. Have the ball. Honestly, it's fine. You guys have the ball. Honestly, it's fine.
I'd watched them the week before against Dumbarton, and I thought they were a wee bit fortunate, especially the first half. I thought until they equalised, Dumbarton were far and away the better team, but they equalised it quite near the end of the first half, and then in the second period they probably were the better team. And then like Frank McEwen does that thing where when Dumbarton got a goal down, he makes like umpteen substitutions that just causes like chaos in his side. They done that against Edinburgh, and I again, it made them worse, as it seems to do every week. But I wasn't overly impressed by them against the Suns, albeit they probably just about deserved to win. But if they'd played as poorly against Dumbarton in that first half, against maybe anybody else in that division, the game might have been done before they kind of got their goal. So I wasn't surprised that the East Kilbride got the win. I suppose in terms of what Mick Kennedy described, does that suggest he's maybe starting to become a wee bit more pragmatic, which is certainly not something that we've seen from him so far?
That's interesting because that's exactly what I thought. I thought that I remember the start of the match just thinking, Christ, they're not really. This is quite East Kilbride like, where it's very much like we have to have the ball. We need to be on top. And I've spoken in the past about like dominating possession stats. And thinking that's quite an empty thing, especially when there's times when you watch East Kilbride play. When East Kilbride are probably at their most indulgent, for want of a better word, when they don't have that degree of penetration, it can be just ball going back between the centre backs. A midfielder might drop deep, pop it off, and that same thing happens again. But this was just very much like he'd obviously done his homework in advance and had been, or had somebody watched the Dumbarton game and was just like, we can pick them off here. And the first goal was a degree of fortune there. Bob McCluskey gets 2 chances at it. It's actually quite a good save from Mark.
Great ball. But a great assist from, was it John Robertson? I think he's kind of crossfield. Maybe it was a great pass, whoever it was.
Aye. And then the second goal, it's actually quite a work. It's a nice wee bit of interchange of play down the Edinburgh City's left-hand side on their right. Robertson with a great reverse ball, and then it's put to the byline and just lifted right to the back post. And there's McCluskey. It's just a simple header. McCluskey's not a player I particularly rate, and I think that outside of the goals, I don't necessarily think he did much. But I think it was a game actually where East Kilbride, they had a lot less of the ball, so it was more about their sort of discipline and their defensiveness, and that's what I thought they were. That's what I thought they were really good. Like John Robertson was quiet, but he was quiet in a way where he didn't see a lot of the ball, but was still working hard for the team. I actually thought the best players were the defenders, which is something you wouldn't necessarily say about an East Kilbride team. I thought Craig Hepburn had a really good game in goals. Zai's penalty isn't well hit. That's a save that you maybe expect a goalkeeper to make, but nevertheless, you save a penalty, you get the plaudits for it. And I just thought he was quite good at just maybe coming off his line quite quickly and shutting stuff down. So I'm not sure he can quite play the football that Kennedy ultimately wants him to play, but similar to like Freddie Owens, I think he's a good goalkeeper there who's probably got a future as an SPFL keeper. I actually thought Sean Fagan was the best player in the park, the fullback. Right. There can't be that many times where you would say that. But I would say that's an interesting observation, one I agree with, where it was more, pragmatic is the right word for that. And it's a big win for them. They closed that gap in the Spartans. They were supposed to be playing Dundee United. That match was called off. In fact, I think there was quite a large Spartans contingent sitting directly behind me. Certainly guys in Spartans branded tracksuits. I think the chairman was there. Mixer Patalino was certainly there as well, watching the match.
What was the deal with? I think there was supposed to be the fans were supposed to be kept apart, but did that not happen at all?
Something I had seen in Pine Bovril that had been issues, but I didn't see any trouble from where I was sitting. I saw there was kind of a bunch of wee like East Kilbride you'd probably wee nyaffs for want of a better word that were kind of, when they were going down to the burger stand, they're kind of like giving it the big in to some of the fans, but I didn't see anything. I always thought that how there's the opening to go into the toilets. I always thought that beyond that opening, that's where the away fans go, and there were away fans there, but they were dotted up further into the stand. So I think that was a failure to segregate that, and that's probably something that needs looked at. If there was any bother there, I didn't see any myself. But just sorry, you go.
Sorry, go on.
No, and you go.
No, I was just going to say that like segregation isn't something that I think I've seen before from Edinburgh. So I just thought it was interesting that they'd done it for that game, and I'd heard that didn't particularly work. So I just thought it was quite interesting.
No. It's just that. It was just a lot of the stuff that Edinburgh did, and like you say, like credit to East Kilbride. I think we've given them the credit they deserve for this one, because like you say, very professional, very measured performance, and it's a sign that they're adapting to the division, because they'd drawn twice with them previously, and I think they found them quite difficult to deal with. But like you say, Kennedy had done his homework and knew what needed to be done. Just confused. The stuff that I didn't understand. Christ. I only have to go there and see it every couple of once every 2 months. The kick-off, booting the ball out of play. So in this one,
they're prepared for it now, aren't they? Like teams are prepared for it now.
Totally. So basically, what they would do when the ball was kicked off, right? Shaughan McGuigan is actually off the pitch at kickoff. So the three kickoffs that Edinburgh City had, Shaughan McGuigan's off the pitch. The ball goes out of play. He's actually, and he's just waiting to lift the ball off the wee plastic plinth. You know, it's dotted round. Lift the ball off the pitch. Ball's thrown. So Edinburgh City do not have time to even come into East Kilbride's half, and the ball's back in play. So I honestly don't know what advantage you're getting from it. It might work if there is only one ball available on the pitch and there's no other ball, so it goes out of play. Ball boy's got to go and get it, or the fullback's got to go and run and get it. But there's McGuigan waiting with a ball to get play started again. So it didn't work. There was a bit in the half where I think it was Dylan Williams took a sore one and had to get subbed off about 2 minutes to go in the half. James Lyon, who is a central midfielder, was playing at left back for this one. So Quinn Mitchell comes on. And when I saw Quinn Mitchell come on, he'd been out injured for a wee bit. I thought, that's class, get to see Quinn Mitchell come back. You'd surely just move him to left back and put James Lyon in the middle of the park. No, Lyon's still playing at left back and Quinn Mitchell's in the middle of the park. It just didn't make sense to me. And you know something, I like really like Michael McIndoe. I like being confounded by him. Pretty much everything he does has confounded me, and I think that's class. I like being proven wrong. That's why I've got this soft spot for Edinburgh. I've written them off, proved me wrong. But I just can't see what the thinking is behind it. I'm not. He's doing something that I can't quite see, and that's the thing. And based on that performance, you've turned over the defence. You're giving Chris McQueen's a decent player. I don't want to see him with the football. I want to see Malik Zaid with the ball. Get the ball up to Malik Zaid as quickly as possible. And Zaid was that was the other thing that frustrated me in this game as well. There was a bit in the first half. Zaid's one of the best dribblers in Scottish football. I'd even say top flight football and stuff I watch. Zaid's just an absolute joy to watch. And there was a couple of times in the game where he would honestly, he plays like he's wearing ice skates when he's at his best. There was a bit where he took the ball down the right hand side. Joe Baldy tried to come over and take him, and he popped it around him. Then Andrew Kyle, the young fullback, comes over and he basically skins two players. He nutmegs Baldy and then does a wee shimmy to take it past Kyle. He's got the boxes coming in. Uzi C's running to the box. Flip it in first time. But I said, no, he drops in and brings it in. So the run's gone. And it's like, why are you not just being fucking more direct? That was the thing that frustrated me. It was just, it's, you know something, there's more than one way to skin a cat. Football, there's different ways to win a game of football. My personal preference is I like fast football. I like seeing the ball get up the park as quickly as possible. And that's not direct, just lumping up the park for the sake of it. It's how do you get up the park in as few and as quickly as possible. That's what I like to see. And Edinburgh City are capable of doing it. I've seen them when they're at their best. I was there when they beat the Spartans 5-0. That was the apex of this Edinburgh City team. And just having seen that to this, where it was just slow and deliberate and ponderous and ultimately ineffective, it just, you're better than this. You don't need to be doing this. You're better than this. But as McIndoe said in his post-match interview, James Stokes is coming back. Jason Jarvis is coming back. Quinn Mitchell's just back after a wee layoff. So there are players coming back that can make a difference. But my goodness, you do not have much time. These players will need to come back and make a difference very quickly. They're fortunate that Dumbarton are absolutely stinking out the joint at the moment. That was a terrible defeat to Forfar Athletic at the weekend, and follow up with a defeat against Stannon Athletic. It feels like, as I mentioned earlier, feels like it's between those two to avoid finishing bottom.
I think so as well. And what I said about Cove is very much applicable to Edinburgh as well. Like, people talk about, oh, Edinburgh are a good team. If I hadn't been for that points deduction, but they are, in terms of reeling teams in, they are doing it far, far too slowly. And I think if Dumbarton go on any kind of run, like I wouldn't be surprised if Frank McEwen is relieved of his duties soon-ish. Like, if they lose again at the weekend, I wouldn't be overly surprised. In fact, I'd actually wonder if he might have been out of a job after that defeat to Annan. And if they do bring in somebody else, and he manages to get anything out of that squad, then Edinburgh are in a real predicament. I thought they'd be out of it long before now, but they're still very much in it, and I do worry about them.
Yeah, I just can't see it. There's it's a frustration about Edinburgh. I'd say this, it's not like Dumbarton. I think Dumbarton have got a real whiff about them in free fall. But I mean, not to touch on, because Fraser and I spoke about this last week. The big, probably one of the biggest mistake, there have been a number of mistakes clubs have made over the course of the season. Probably the biggest mistake anyone's made in Scottish football was like giving Wilfred Nancy the job at Celtic. That is the biggest mistake that's been made in Scottish football. Second biggest mistake in Scottish football was, it's all context, it's all in context, it's all relative, but giving Frank McEwen the job after Stevie Farrell, that was a big mistake as well. And yeah, like I said at the time, that McEwen might have some brilliant ideas, different approach to how he wants things done. But you were the assistant manager for like 2 years under an unpopular manager. Fans, you might have all your ideas. Fans won't see it that way. Fans will just see it as a continuity appointment. Continuity, as Joel said. Continuity appointment. And so they're not happy with that. And on top of that as well, I don't think it's a particularly good squad that Dumbarton have got. When I looked at the Edinburgh team, I think there was, if you've got someone like Malik Zaid, that's someone who can turn games on their head. It didn't happen against East Kilbride. I think that there were too many times where he just ran the ball up his own arse and it just dribbled into cul-de-sacs. But we know how devastating a player he can be. You bring in James Stokes, someone who can add a bit more to the forward line. Jason Jarvis, a good passer ball, and someone who's got a bit of physicality about him. They have the players for it takes. It's just be normal.
The thing that you would clutch to in terms of Dumbarton is, though, they're very, I suppose it is similar to Edinburgh, though, that even when they lose, they're very rarely hammered. Like, I don't know if you had a chance to watch the highlights of the game against Annan. I thought they were very unfortunate to get beat. Well, I say unfortunate. There was a point where Ali Roy and Scott Tomlinson,
they ran into each other.
Yeah, right through just the Caribbean and ran into each other. So that's not unfortunate. That's just really, really bad. But I thought over the piece, they probably deserve something from the game. And I know Frank McEwen has talked about, well, when you're down there, that's a rub of the green. You just don't get it. I think there's a lot more to it than that. But no, I would not like to stick my neck on the line and say that Edinburgh are going to get out of this. And a few months ago, I did not think that would be the case. I thought they'd be absolutely fine. I am not so sure now.
Yeah, I thought it's safe to say that £20 is staying firmly within your savings account. Up next, Shaughan, it's Annan Athletic versus East Kilbride.
As much as Annan are on a really good run of form, they're not too far away from the promotion playoffs now. I think that East Kilbride will win this one.
Spartans versus Edinburgh City.
Oh, I will go for... Well, I mean, Edinburgh were poor on Saturday. I didn't think there were anything startling the weekend before that. I'm going to go for a Spartans victory.
I'm going to go for an away win. Just Edinburgh City away from home are a different prospect. And I say this all the time, I cannot for the life of me figure out why that's the case. That just seems ludicrous. But nevertheless, we were as well, listener, going to be talking about Clyde versus Elgin City. I had bought a ticket for this game. I bought it really early doors as well. I think I bought it on Saturday morning. But then I had to run some errands after work on Tuesday night. I've started having to wear glasses, so I had to go and pick them up, which is great.
You started wearing glasses?
I started wearing glasses. I actually probably should have them on right now, but I say just for like looking at computer screens and stuff like that.
Right, okay. But I suppose you're looking at a computer now. You should definitely be wearing them.
Aye, but it's too late now to put them on because we really are in the home straight for this. You know what I enjoy doing? I like telling people I've had a health scare, and people are like, "Oh my god, what? I need to wear glasses." But it's quite funny that way. Try it if you ever need to wear glasses. That's how you can get a bit of a laugh off your pals. Nevertheless, the point I was going to make was that I just simply, by the time I got in the house and had my dinner, on top of that as well, I got a new pair of trainers and had a big blister on the back of my heel because it's the rubbing against it. So I need to go for a shower, and I just simply did not.
Do you know what I'm getting from this story? I'll tell you what I'm getting from this story. You just didn't want to go. You didn't want to sit in the cold and watch Clyde versus Elgin.
Oh, do you know something? I did, because I think it's... Yeah, so take that back. I did want to go and watch it. It's just that I like that because I've spoken about these teams. I've never actually seen them in the flesh this season, so I really wanted to be there to see this 1-1 draw inevitable from Clyde, and see how they get on, so we could report back. So unfortunately, it couldn't be the case. So I watched an absolutely dreadful Edinburgh derby on my laptop, which
it was horseshit.
Yeah, it was absolutely shit. So aye, that was my Tuesday. So on top of that as well, I think I might be getting deep vein thrombosis in my calf. It's like, something that feels like I've been kicked in the calf, but I haven't been kicked in the calf, but I'm limping when I'm walking, and it's embarrassing, and it feels like it's DVT. As I was looking up, I think that's the worst case scenario.
I mean, it is, but how would you have contracted DVT?
I don't know, a long haul flight or something.
Have you been in a long haul flight?
No, I haven't. So I don't know where it would have come from. If there's any doctors listening to this podcast, please let me know what is going wrong with my calf, because I'm limping. I was limping today, and it was just really sore. I'm falling to bits. It's like, and I've noticed that I've gone really, really grey as well. So the grey hair, the glasses,
specky,
the
sore calf,
specky, yeah, it's a limping specky bastard. Aye. So that's it. That's what's happening to me. That's what's happening to me. But aye, Shaughan, listen, enough about that. That was good fun. That'll probably do us for another week.
I think so.
It was good fun to spend time with you while I've still got it, the time to spend with you. We will be back at some point soon, hopefully with a celebrity guest in our midst. We don't want to say too much.
Mm-hmm.
We'll find out if we can organise that. But in the meantime, if you are not satisfied and you need more top footy content to satiate you, go to the Patreon, patreon.com/Terrace Podcast. You can get hours and hours and hours and hours of great content in there for as little as £2 per month. There's a really good podcast actually that dropped earlier in the week. It was the Seasons from Hell episode where Jake Ferguson and Fraser Clark were talking. You don't know who Jake Ferguson is. You know who Fraser Clark is, though. They were talking about Dunfermline Athletics' 14-15 season when the Pars finished 7th in League One. Oh, how embarrassing! So Shaughan, we'll be back at some point soon. Yeah, I've already said that. I'm just thinking about my own failing body here, and that's what I've spooked myself. Shaughan, a pleasure.
No, thank you.
You, the listener, a pleasure, and enjoy your football. But unlike the unsegregated East Kilbride supporters who apparently went out of their way to antagonise Edinburgh City fans at Meadowbank, I didn't see it. Please do so respectfully. Thank you very much.